Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelson, professional horse trainer, and with me, my good friend, Deb Romero, certified Alexander Technique instructor. And today's topic, I know we've covered this in the past before, but it came up again,
It came
uh,
up again.
as it does. So today's topic is sort of talking about straight on a circle and what that means. And Deb, why are we sort of
Why are
covering
we here
this?
today?
Why?
I just went to meet with a new client, a mom and a 16-year-old pony club girl, and I'm always taken back when they are still teaching what I call the banana theory, which is the horse is supposed to bend their spine to go around a circle.
Yeah.
And so I was in the ring, and luckily the mom is a physical therapist. So it was pretty easy to explain to her. I said, "We'll draw a circle, and I
Hmm.
want you to bend your body like we're trying to do with our horses to go around a circle. Does that feel right?"
Oh, good one.
She goes, "No, that feels terrible." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah." I said the kinematics of the legs are not correct. So yeah, that's maybe why your horse has hock injections. I don't know. But
It
anyway,
also is going to weaken all the sort of oblique muscle group that
oh,
makes
exactly.
the leg stance is going to get narrower and narrower because the legs are going the wrong way.
And that's
And
what she said. Look at how base narrow my horse is. I was like, I know, I know.
yeah, and people look at base narrow as like a confirmation point. And I go, when the front legs, especially when the hind legs and the front legs are sort of closer together. So the front legs, there's little space between the two front legs, or there's very little space between the two hind legs. That's what we call base narrow.
Mhm.
And I even had a farrier tell me you shoe them differently. And I'm like, why? Because in my
Wow,
mind, I go, that is
that's huge.
I said, that's a muscular issue. That's not a confirmation point, especially if you consider the entire thoracic sling is all soft tissue.
Mhm.
So the horse's two front legs are free floating. So if they're base narrow, that's a muscle issue. That's not a
Right.
confirmation point because the front legs are not attached skeletally to the rib cage. They float in those slings of muscle. And depending on the muscle tension and the muscle use and where it's atrophied, where it's strong, the distance, especially between those front legs, can
Mhm.
drastically increase. And
Yeah.
so it goes hand in hand with straight on a circle that the horses tend to interfere on the medial side or the inside of their
Mm.
hooves, and they just start to get narrower and narrower because you're not working those oblique muscle groups correctly.
The adductors and abductors.
Yeah, and this
So,
idea
yeah.
that from nose to tail, the horse's midline should bend into the same shape as the circle. I go, that's in all these magazines
I
still
know.
today.
I know. That's what the mom said. She goes, "Well, I just read an article." It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, and when you actually look at the more advanced research, not even that advanced, we're talking the 60s,
Right.
the 70s, the 90s,
Hmm.
into the early 2000s, we now have modern research that tells us that isn't actually how it works. It works a little differently than what we thought 100 years ago, which is true with human bodies
Right.
and human sports
Hmm.
medicine. We didn't
Yeah.
know, right? Even though we have classical sports training, it's like we update that in the light of new knowledge. And
I think
Jean-Luc,
that's, yeah, that's what really just takes me back to think that these old theories are still being taught when the information is out there, like you said, not that new,
right?
60s through the 90s of new research done on horse movement. And like I said, Centaur Biomechanics out of the UK, they're on the forefront of doing studies on horse movement. So, and it's out there, it's on Facebook, it's available to all.
Absolutely. And that was one of the greatest things I learned working with Jean-Luc Cornille, who has his website, Science of Motion, is that we have to go out and seek the information. We have to read these research papers because horse training goes back thousands of years
Mm.
and it doesn't get easily updated. It's like it's like
Kind
we're
of like
on
the Alexander technique has been around 100 years and not very many people know about it.
exactly.
Yeah.
And Alexander technique, the modern research supports
Hmm.
the work that was done 100 years ago.
Right.
And in the horse business, the modern research doesn't always support the explanation of the classical masters. And so it's not that the classical masters were wrong or didn't know what they were talking about, but we didn't have the language or the research to really be accurate. And with the body, it's about accuracy.
It's
We,
totally about accuracy. It's
yes.
physics, like we've said before. It's pure physics.
Yeah. And you can't take a theory about a body and sort of make it work because that's what the ancient old masters said would work if we hold it up against the light of new knowledge and modern research. If that theory or that explanation was accurate, it would hold up to modern research. So that old idea, which is pretty traditional, it's how I learned to ride
Hmm.
circles, it's how we all
Hmm.
learned,
Hmm.
that you want the horse's spine to take the shape of the circle.
Hmm.
I go, that's just been disproven for so long, and yet it is the most prevalent
Oh.
belief in our modern horse world.
Hmm.
And it's the cause. It's why vets tell us don't do circles, don't do
Oh,
lateral
that's
work.
right.
Like the vets recognize the problem, but they don't necessarily have the training solution.
Right.
They just tell us don't do circles,
Do
don't
straight
do
lines. And I'm
do
like,
straight lines.
oh,
Just do straight lines. And that's the best they can do in the situation. I get it
right.
because it's advice that will be less damaging if
Good
people
point.
have the wrong concept of how to ride on a circle or how their horse should be coordinated on a circle. And I
And
call it
I
the
think
same thing. I go, your horse is not a banana. Like,
I call it the banana theory.
yeah, the banana theory of the midline. I go, there's just so much wrong with that. And it was actually it was sort of the popular belief or what we knew at the time when even science used to think that every vertebra of the horse's spine moved in equal amounts, had an equal range of
Hmm.
motion. Now we know that's not the case.
Right. And
It
if
was
you think about it
also,
structurally, if you actually look at the anatomy of all of that, it's very obvious.
yes,
If
now
if
to
you just
us,
look,
it's
yeah, if
yes,
you just look at the bones of the spine, you can go, oh, yeah, well, the lumbar and the sacrum, not very movable just by looking
yes.
at their structure and mass.
Yeah, and on a quadruped, like I think the first understanding from the human perspective was that the horse's spine is a lot like ours as bipeds,
Hmm.
right? That there's sort of a roughly equal range of motion possible between all of the vertebra, with the lumbar a little more restricted and, different areas of the spine with more or less, but not that great a difference in range of motion. And in any quadruped, especially the horse, which is why we ride them, is because in their thoracolumbar spine, the range of motion is so tiny. It's measured in millimeters, right? And it's so minuscule that at one time, even saddle fitters and vets considered it unimportant because it was so small, that range of motion. So like we talked about when we did the review of Jean-Marie Denois' research paper, I forget the title of it, but way back in 1999, he's saying the full range of motion between a lifted back in flexion on a horse and a completely dropped back in spinal extension on a horse, that entire up-down range of motion only is 52 or 54 millimeters.
Mm,
That's the complete range of motion. Now, when we add in muscle and soft tissue, what we feel as a rider feels massive. It
right,
feels much
right.
bigger than that. But the range of motion for the vertebra, especially in that thoracolumbar spine, is really measured in millimeters. So that's maybe 2.25 inches.
Right.
It's not that
Are you
big of a
talking like
distance.
up and down flexion extension?
Yes, so the up
Yeah.
down of
Okay.
the horse's back,
Okay.
right? The up down movement. And then we have lateral bending of the spine, which doesn't happen equally from nose to tail in the horse,
Right.
right? It's much greater through the neck than it ever can be through the thoracolumbar spine.
Hmm.
And the range of motion is naturally more available in the upper thoracic than it is compared to the lower thoracic or the lumbar,
Right.
right? So the spine doesn't bend equally throughout, which is the entire premise of bending your horse's midline to the shape of the circle. That's what that instruction is based on.
Ah.
That the horse's entire spine laterally flexes in equal amounts between all the vertebrae. Since at least like as it goes back to the early research in the 50s and 60s, but really confirmed in the early 2000s, even late 1999, that now we know that's not true. Some parts of the spine have a huge range of motion laterally, like the neck on the
Hmm.
horse, but then the upper back, it's more restricted. And once you get kind of past the rider's thigh, all the way to the tail, there's very minuscule, tiny, restricted amounts for lateral bending side to side. And so if we're trying to make our horse's midline the shape of the circle, we end up overly flexing some parts of the spine, overly
Mm.
bending the spine in
Hmm.
some parts, which is creating a lockup or a restriction in other parts
Right. It's just the law of biomechanics, which, the stabilization it has to occur somewhere,
somewhere. And
somewhere.
and so that idea, which is based on flawed theory, right? But the new theory,
Mhm.
it's like it hasn't disseminated. I swear, the whole horse world is still on dial-up. It's
That's
like
a good way to put it.
it's like no, science has moved us up to like fiber optics, and the horse world is still no, no, we just like dial-up. We're fine. We don't
We're
need
fine
to.
here. Just,
Yes,
yeah, go to hock injections and why is my horse lame? And yeah, all of that.
right, right. Exactly. And it's a direct, but I'm with you. It's like the prevalence of that idea is
The,
so
the
perpetuated
mhm.
in our horse industry that I go, no wonder we have such a high rate of lameness, breakdown, behavioral issues, problems with performance. Even if we take a beautifully bred horse that's just born an
Mm,
athlete, how we ask that body to function. If we're still trying to turn him into a banana to make a circle, you're just going to keep compromising the inherent talent. Like the horse can kind of work around it and get the job done for many years, but it's not building the strength of the body. It's taxing.
right. It's abusing it as far as I'm concerned. It's not using it correctly. And it's just like humans. I mean, that's what happens to us as we age or have trauma. It's always amazing to me when somebody has a trauma, say a broken leg, and they go into PT and that the leg that was broken performs better than the one that
Oh, interesting.
didn't have the PT. And I'm like, yeah, when you pay attention to it and use it correctly,
You retrain it to better
You
function.
retrain it to work better.
Hmm.
And you see athletes, are like that all the time. They're on the forefront, human athletes of research and education.
Because the whole reason I teach what I teach is because it helps overcome it. Well, first of all, you reduce your risk of
Hmm.
injury. Number one,
Right.
you're reducing risk of injury. You're gaining a competitive advantage by
It for the long term, yeah.
not only for the long term, but it's like a horse that is more ideally coordinated mechanically is going to run faster, jump higher, be
Hmm.
more agile, turn faster, and less prone to injury or illness. When we use the body
Yeah, yeah, and that's what they,
incorrectly, you
yep.
have the opposite effect.
And that's what they say about the Alexander technique is it even makes a bank robber a better bank robber
Yeah.
because you're using yourself better. You flow better, everything works better.
No, and that's what fascinates me about, I mean, I call it rehab training, but the type of changes to coordination, like you do with
Hmm.
Alexander technique for people, I do with horses and riders. And it's the very same training, whether I'm helping a horse recover from idiopathic lameness
Hmm.
or a painful lameness from an injury or rehabbing behavior, trying to get the horse
Right,
safe, or
right.
starting a young horse, or working with a performance horse to increase performance or enhance performance. I go, it's all the same work. It just doesn't, you can arrive at it while you're still healthy and benefit, or you arrive at it as the last chance solution
Mm.
for big behavioral problems or big lameness issues or big performance issues. I go, that's how most people arrive at it now, like I did, because there was nothing else out there to solve these problems.
I just wish the problems weren't there. Wouldn't it be nice if it wasn't considered rehab work?
Yeah, but as long as straight on a circle means turning
Circle,
our horse into a
bam.
banana, we're going to keep breaking horses down. And it's not my opinion. Like
It's not an opinion at all. It's fact.
I go, the farriers see it, the vets see it, the body
Hmm.
workers see it, but the trainers are, Jean-Luc used to say, the curators of the museum, the 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 carriers of tradition, right? And so the training and even the judging, like in
Oh, that's true.
some of the competitions that are subjectively judged, where it's
Hmm.
not a timed event or, different faults. The ones that are subjectively judged are perpetuating a lot of these traditions
Mm.
that are really acting against our horses' best possible use.
And it's a wonder they don't just kill us?
I know. That's a whole nother podcast.
That's another
I
podcast.
know. I've been thinking about horsepower a lot, and I go,
Horsepower.
it's kind of amazing that horsepower is one of those things we use to describe cars and rockets, and it's like, and yet these horses don't kill us, even when
I
we get it
know, it's just
wrong.
amazing.
They're so gentle, and they
Most of
try.
them. I mean,
I mean, they can be pushed to the point that
yeah,
they're going to protect themselves like any living creature. But for the most part, they cooperate with us. These 1,000-pound
I
animals
know. There's
cooperate with us. So,
those
anyways,
silly
back on
humans.
track. We digress.
We digress. Oh,
So the question I get all the time, and I don't know, like I think it's brilliant that you asked this. What did you say? She's a physical therapist?
the mom is a physical therapist,
Yeah.
so
So you
I
said, is this how you would walk a circle?
walk on a circle. So I had her
Right.
draw a circle in the arena, and I said, "Well, walk like that. Tell me how that works for you."
Upright. Yeah, because
Upright.
I've even had people get, and you can try this at home
Oh,
in the
that's a
privacy
good
of your
one.
own home, get down on all fours.
And bend around a circle, see
and
how that
try to
works for you.
bend. Yeah, try to mimic what you're asking your horse to do, right? And you'll find if you try to shape even your human spine, which does bend more equally between each vertebra,
Yeah, it does.
it does. But even that, if you try to go around a circle on all fours, what you're going to find is your back tilts to the
You're going to have a
inside
rotation.
or
Yeah.
the outside, and you're going to
Mm-hmm.
find you're going to overload your hand, which would be your front leg, or your knee, which would be your hind leg, and it's going to hurt. You're going to feel all that body weight shift, and you'll
Mm-hmm.
feel the muscle tension from that. Right. And so I go,
Yep.
try it for yourself because when we sort of put ourselves in that horizontal position on hands and knees, we're closer to understanding what our horse feels, even though we have a very short neck and our spine has a different construction, we kind of get a general idea of the strain that we're putting our horse under, the level of
Mm-hmm.
discomfort from that theory.
Yeah. So maybe we should talk about actually what's supposed to be happening
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
kinematically.
is usually the first question I get when I try to gently explain that that is outdated theory. Um, it's the first question I get is, well, then how on earth does a horse get around a circle?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're so long, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you think of the tiniest circle would be a pirouette or a spin, and a bigger circle would be 20 meters or 50 feet, right? So there's all different size circles. And I go, they get around a circle the same way they do a turn on the haunches, right? So a turn on the haunches is the spine is straight and you're asking the horse to move the front end while the inside hind leg sort of pivots,
Right.
right? So the outside hind leg moves, the inside hind leg sort of pivots. And if the inside hind leg steps forward, that would be a pirouette. On a spin, it really just pivots. So
Right.
that's the most extreme version of a circle, right? And
Right.
if you think you're going to bend your horse and achieve either of those movements, you're not,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not without a lot of drama, a lot of pushing, some spurs, some whips, some bamboo poles, and even
What?
then, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be athletic or pretty. So the way a horse's body ideally goes around a circle, and this will bring us all the way back to that base narrow thing, is this from the skull or the horse's poll all the way to the tail should feel like a broomstick, not a banana, right? And so I
Yes.
go, and a lot of times I'll grab a muck fork because I go,
That's a good idea.
the length of a muck fork is almost the length of a normal adult horse, right? And then I go, I put the fork side on the back, kind of like
Right.
the
The pelvis.
hindquarters,
That's cool.
and I'll have somebody ride the muck fork like a hobby horse and go, okay, make a circle. And they can walk, trot, or canter with this muck fork, sort of holding the muck fork between their legs, and it never has to bend, and you get around the circle. So I go, that's the horse's spine. And that's what also keeps the back level. So they're not overloading the inside or outside legs.
The
They're,
rotation part.
they're not
Yeah.
shifting the shoulders in and out. They're not losing stability on the hindquarters. And so the horse's spine should feel just like that muck fork, just like that broomstick handle. And the horse's legs adduct and abduct. Now, what does that mean? Okay. Ad Abduction just means the leg is moving away from the midline,
Right.
right? So if the left front leg is abducting on a circle, it's reaching, say, if you're on a left circle, the left front leg should be reaching away from the midline in the direction of travel. and the opposite front leg is adducting, which means moving towards the midline of the horse, right? So they turn by moving the legs in a slightly lateral direction, adducting and abducting. So
I
there's
think
a,
that's the important piece is that people, I've seen some horses that, that's a whole new way of moving. That
it is
brings us
one of,
back to the base narrow thing.
it's one of the most important parts of rehab,
Oh, I totally agree.
right? So, uh, without a diagram, you guys will have to picture this. So, if the midline of the horse is that muck fork, it's broomstick straight, and the back is level, left to right, the entire time, right? Then to come around the circle, the sequence of events is the inside hind is going to adduct. It's going to step forward towards the midline, and the outside hind leg is going to abduct. It's going to step forward, but away from the midline. That changes the angle and trajectory of the hindquarter. That's where your
Hmm.
steering is, right? So that puts the pelvis on the turn with that leg movement, not the spine. It just repositions the pelvis by moving the leg slightly laterally, right? Then the back is straight and level. So then the inside front leg has to reach in the direction of travel, and the outside front leg reaches towards the midline. And that's what brings the front end around, right? So when we're steering with the reins, it's actually the steering as well as the balance comes like a rudder in a boat. It's actually behind us.
Right.
It's not in front of us. And I think that's the other danger of trying to shape our horse into a banana for a circle is we're thinking all the steering has to happen up front through the neck and shoulders and that the hindquarters will follow.
Or that, with my work, it's that stimulus of the circle itself. The thought of I have to stay on the circle.
Yeah, and a circle, straight on a
Yeah.
circle should feel more like riding a stop sign. It's like it's just a
That's a
couple
good
of
one.
yeah, it's like a couple of steps straight and then the feeling of a small pivot at the turn. And in that pivot, that's why I said it feels a little more like a turn on the haunches,
It's
right? So
almost
that,
to me, I get a vision of a square, that it's these little square movements around the circle. Does that make sense?
yeah,
That
or it's
you're
like a,
right. I visualize in my head, I have a circle with a square in it, and it kind of rides that way. Or maybe an octagon would be better. Something like that, where you're
yeah,
making these minute movements
yeah.
to stay
So
straight.
something like if you were riding a very small circle, a square would be a good image. And if you're riding a
Right.
big circle, something like a hexagon or an
Mm.
octagon or something that is a series of a straight line at an angle with a pivot point,
I
and then
like that.
another
I like
short
that.
line and
Yeah.
a pivot point. And that by maintaining the top line, the spine, the midline, that's our job as a rider. So when we turn our seat in the saddle, a tiny little amount, I like to tell people the steering wheel actually lives under our seat bones. It's not up here in our
That's a good
hands,
one.
right?
Yeah.
So when we pivot the center of the horse to maintain that straight line, little pivot, straight line, little pivot, then that's what helps our horse figure out, oh, I need this leg here and that leg there, and this leg does this and that leg does that. That's how you restore the correct leg kinematics,
Hmm.
right? Is by keeping the midline straight and stable, not bending it into a banana. The only way the horse can get around a circle is by adducting and abducting the legs. And that, like so many people, and I see this on Facebook all the time, what are some exercises to increase the strength in my horse's oblique muscles or, you know, things like that? And everybody's still recommending ground poles. And I go,
Well,
actually,
Centaur biomechanics disproved that. So So
Yes,
if they want
because
the research, it's out there.
just like the idea that straight on a circle involves bending the midline, ground poles can destabilize the midline, just
Mhm.
like circles ridden incorrectly can destabilize the midline. And as soon as that midline is not broomstick straight, the leg kinematics go the wrong way. Where the leg should be abducting, it starts adducting,
Mhm.
right? And that can happen on all legs. So instead of, like, say, on a left circle, the left front leg should abduct, reaching away from the midline, and the right front leg should go towards the midline, adduct. But if you bend the spine into a banana, and you guys can videotape yourself doing this, it's dynamic and predictable. This is
It
not my
is.
opinion, right?
Right.
So if you videotape doing a circle both ways, right? And your horse might struggle to do it correctly if you've been doing the banana thing for a while. You're going to have some tight shoulders,
And that's a
but
good point because they might not have the capability.
might be quite hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But if you
agree.
look at where are the horse's legs going laterally when I ride a circle, just start with the way you've been trained or you believe or you've read in all the magazines how to be, bend on a circle. Watch the legs, right? And watch the top of the pelvis because I guarantee the front legs will either go straight at best or the wrong direction more likely. So the left front leg will go towards the midline and the right front leg will go away from the midline on a left circle. That's opposite. And then if you watch the top of the pelvis or the saddle, you'll see a lot of tilting left and
Hmm.
right. So instead of the saddle remaining level on that circle, or the hindquarters, if you're riding, you could look back on the top of the hindquarters and you'll see a tilting effect through the saddle and the hindquarters by trying to bend your horse into a banana. It's it's just going to happen. Like I
And
go,
that's and that and correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe we've talked about this before, but because we're asking for the banana, that you're going to get rotation in the rib cage.
yes.
Right.
So rotation is a twisting function of the spine in us and horses,
Right.
right? So in us, rotation is if we twist our torso left and right, right? And in the horse, if we're looking sort of bird's eye view down on a horse's barrel, that same twisting function we feel as a rolling effect of the barrel. We feel
Or
the
like you
barrel,
said, oh my gosh, look at my saddle. It's always hanging out on the right.
yes. Or if you watch yourself on video, the rotation function would manifest as the tilting of the
Right.
pelvis. Right. And I've even had trainers tell me you want the inside side of the pelvis and the inside leg to be lower than the outside. And that's part of the
Interesting.
whole bend your horse into
The
a
banana
banana
theory.
theory.
Hmm.
And what
You,
happens
hmm.
is when the inside hind
Wow.
adducts or goes towards the midline too much, right? And the pelvis tilts lower on the inside, you're not actually engaging the hindquarters anymore because that inside hind leg, as it hits and crosses the midline of the horse, you've now disengaged the hindquarters. You've not
So then you've got
engaged them.
stress on the stifle and the hop.
Yes. And the leg will typically land at an oblique angle rather than vertical. So you'll get more concussive forces on the outside of the hoof, right? And it'll go up through all the leg joints with sort of a left to right shear through the joints that's not ideal. Rather, because those hind leg joints are really meant for straight forward and back movement, not really lateral movement,
Okay.
right? So straight on a circle to me means I've got this broomstick midline tracking straight turn, straight turn, straight turn. And the turns are kind of micro amounts, right? But
Yeah, I like that.
the legs are reaching. So the legs moving forward in a slight lateral direction. Sometimes you can't even see it on a big circle.
True.
right?
It's very slight.
It's very slight. It keeps the legs, it keeps the pelvis level, the back level. The slight lateral movement of the legs is what repositions the hindquarter to the new change of direction on a circle. Same for a turn, and a circle is just a constant turn, right? So,
I like that. Yeah.
yeah, that's all a circle is. And so when you're the hind leg lateral movement that's so slight we don't have to see it, that changes the direction of the tail or the rudder, right? And then the front end kind of follows that. And so the front end, the hind end shifts slightly outward on the circle, and the leg movement, which is opposite on the front legs, brings the front end of the horse inward on the circle. So the hindquarters shift out a little, front end shifts in a little. And that way the spine never needs to bend. And it's so subtle, it's hard to even see
Hmm.
the difference in a horse that's, not excessively bent on the circle or one that's tracking straight on a circle. It can
Right.
visually be kind of a subtle difference. So when I can see a horse bend the neck on a circle, is way too much.
Well,
Way
that's a
too
good point.
much.
When you can see it, then you know it's way overdone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that also putting the Alexander technique into the equation of changing the thought of how that happens in the human
Yeah,
because we
because we can walk a very tight circle without any sort of
Mhm.
banana shape through our spine.
Right.
It's
So
in,
there's a whole muscle memory around it of how to execute it and changing those software and in our own body asking different questions of our horse.
yeah, because the sad part, like I know, you brought it up when we pulled up the Zoom for the podcast. It's like, oh, it's making me crazy. I
It's
keep
making
running
me
into
crazy.
this. And I think the more we know, I think what makes you crazy makes me crazy about this is in your mind, you're just going, every time the rider has that concept in their head,
Hmm.
it's like a it's a slow motion problem for the horse's body that
Oh,
can
that's a good way to
just
put it.
become a landslide at a certain point, and you've got now a painful lameness issue. You
Hmm.
now have atrophied muscles that should be working and overworked muscles that are trying to compensate, and tightness where there doesn't need to be tightness, and weight where there doesn't need to be weight, all because of that freaking concept that has been
Yeah.
carried on too
And the
long.
bone shear, like you said, the bone shear of the joints changes. And it's the same with people. I mean, bad use is bad use.
Yes.
And joints are going to take the toll of bad use.
Well, and we don't pay for it immediately, just like the
No,
horse's body. That's the
that's totally true.
problem. I think
Hmm.
that's the problem with why the information gets out so slowly is in the human body, we don't pay for our bad habits until we're hitting middle age and
Hmm.
elderly, and then all of our little habits have now created hip joint issues or knee issues or arthritis in the
Hmm.
shoulders. And we think, oh, because it took so long, we associate it with aging. We go, I'm
You know,
just getting old.
that's a real good point. I have a story around that because when I was training Welsh ponies, oh, I was my late teens, early 20s. I was having so much hip pain. And of course, so I went to the doctor and they said, oh, you need both hip replaced at the age of 19.
Oh my God. I did not know
And
that.
oh no, I didn't,
I don't
that's
think
a
you
new
ever
one.
told me that. Yeah.
And that freaked me out, of course. And I even set it all up. I was going to do it. And then at the last minute, I backed out because I was going to be laid up for a year.
Oh
And
my
income
gosh.
wise, I could not be laid up, not work for a year. So And even my friend who's a massage therapist, always looked at me like, oh, you're going to be, between the two of us, you're going to be the one getting hip replacements, not me.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
I welcomed the Alexander technique, and all of that has pretty much gone away just
Yeah,
by changing my use.
I actually ride with less pain in my 50s now. I have no pain, I should say, where when I was a teenager coming up as a jump rider,
Hmm.
I constantly had low back and knee pain and even some ankle pain. And it was like,
Interesting.
I just thought that was part of the deal of being
Right.
athletic is that you have aches and pains. But when I started changing how I was riding, I had zero pain. It actually strengthened some of the weaker areas of my body and made me change some of my own habits of coordination in order to
Yeah,
ride better. And as a horse trainer, you're always using your body as the main tool
that's a
of
good point.
transforming the horse's coordination. And so to be a good jockey is one thing and win a show, but to actually influence the horse's movement in a positive way, you kind of have to get your act together too. You
Yeah,
have to
and
really work on
that's,
yourself.
you hit the nail on the head. It's not just the horse. It's, the rider needs to be very attentive and aware, kinesthetically aware of their own use.
But I think what scares me about this particular tradition that we're talking about is even after learning to use my body better, communicate better with the horse, and do lots of things that improve the horse's movement, if I still had the concept of the banana midline on a circle, I would just be taking 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps
Good
forward, two
point.
steps back. I would not be actually moving a horse forward because I would be undoing all the balance I worked on off of circles would then
Hmm.
go out the window on a circle, right? Or even lateral work. People still
Mm,
think the whole midline is what bends. I go, in correct lateral work, you're only flexing the pole and you're only asking the spine to bend between a small window of T9 to T14. I go, that's a very small area of the kind of upper to mid thoracic spine.
right,
And so, or actually, I guess the mid thoracic to lower, there's 18 thoracic. So you're in between 9 and 14, which is just really around our leg. It's not that big of a distance.
right.
And unless we know that about correct lateral bending, we think all lateral bending means turn the midline from a straight line into a banana or a curve. And that just causes a cascade of issues. I guess
And we
that's the
don't,
best way to put it. It just throws the whole body out of
mhm.
balance.
And we think of it as a movement, as a goal, instead of feeling what's going on underneath us to achieve that. Our
Yeah, I
brain
still have,
automatically clicks to the maneuver and not the
and
process.
I still have riders all the time think that the only way to ride a circle is inside leg to outside rein. I go, that is the instruction that goes hand in hand with
Hmm.
banana my horse's spine onto the shape of a circle. Those two things go hand in hand. And if you, I can walk into any barn in the US today and find at least 3 people still really wholeheartedly working diligently on that theory. And it
Instead
doesn't,
of,
it's not even English writers. It can be
ah,
Western writers as well.
so
Like,
it's instead of thinking of, and this is so true for the work I do. It doesn't matter what the maneuver is. What matters is the correct use of the spine.
yes. And
That's what it
sometimes
boils
we
down to. How
can,
do I turn left and still keep my spine straight?
yes.
That's what it is.
And just to throw out there into the world through this podcast, it's possible.
It is. Yeah, we're not asking for something we haven't actually achieved, people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
we've
and
done it.
so people think, how on earth, like when you're really kind of mired in that belief system of the banana spine on a circle or banana spine for lateral work, you almost can't imagine how it would be possible, something different. And the answer is in the leg kinematics. If
Right.
the spine is stabilized in a non-bending straight alignment, and the rotation function, the twisting function is stabilized, so there's no rolling of the barrel, tilting of the pelvis, then the horses very quickly, they may have to work through some tightness in the
Right.
muscles, but they very naturally and very quickly figure out the legs need to move inward and outward to get around the turn. And
Yeah,
that's actually how you restore. So while vets are saying, never do circles on this lame horse, in the privacy of my own training barn, I go, I do circles all the time to
yeah.
restore soundness. But
Correct circles. It's
it's
the
a two-edged
correctness.
sword. It's
Yeah,
not the
it's the
circle itself.
straightness on the circle that matters.
Yes. And I tell
And
people,
that's, yeah.
I go, doing circles is a two-edged sword. If you do them incorrectly, it is the fastest way to break your horse down.
Hmm.
And that's the banana on the circle will break your horse down, right? And not my opinion.
No,
You know,
it's out
oh,
there.
judges are maybe going to tell me I'm wrong, and every magazine tells me that's not true. Even some experts in books are going to say differently. I go, try it. The body isn't going to lie to you. It's not my opinion. I just want to know how things work, and this is how things work.
And try it on yourself. I
Try it
mean,
on yourself and
try it on yourself.
videotape it on
Yeah.
your horses, right? But circles are a two-edged sword. I go, if you ride a circle on that banana theory or do lateral work trying to bend your horse's midline into a banana, it is the fastest way to create lameness and different issues in your horse. But if you take that idea, I could ride a circle or could even do lateral work with the pole straight, with the midline like a broomstick, straight front to back, level left to right, and then try the very same circle or the very same lateral movement, right? So
It
like
takes reorganization. I mean, it's not immediately because, you're changing the
you're
thought
changing
or
everything.
you're changing the process from the brain to the limb.
Yes, it's a long
You're
distance
asking, so it's just as hard for the horse as it is for the human to
to
change that.
change. Yes.
Yeah. That,
Yeah. Because
when
you're
we get,
running into every weak muscle, every
yeah,
tight muscle, as well
exactly.
as sort of that feeling in the horse. I don't know where my legs go all of a
Yeah.
sudden.
Or how do I do this? It's kind of like I tell people, it's like learning a new language or a musical instrument. The ABCs at the beginning are hard and you really got to focus, but the flow comes later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you guys at home try this with your horses and videotape, the first time you ask your horse to go around a turn even or a large circle with the midline straight, your horse will struggle.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It will
They
not be easy.
yeah, so please be
Hmm.
forgiving.
Yes, be gentle.
To be gentle because it's just as difficult for you to not, make mistakes as it is for them.
Yes. No, and the body, like sort of, I guess we call it muscle memory, is set up for a different coordination. And so
Right.
when you go to alter coordination, it's a big deal. It takes
It's
some
kind of
time.
like going to PT and having somebody,
It's
say, "No, we're
exactly
going to
like
do it this
PT.
way."
Yes. And you're
We're
like,
going to do it what?
what? Yeah, I go, even though I've
That's how
had,
it's supposed to work. Oh,
I know, I go, I've
what?
had my left hand my whole life. It doesn't mean it's as good as my right hand. You know,
Oh, and
it's
I'm the
like,
opposite. So,
yeah. And I go, but having to work left-handed on certain tasks or be ambidextrous, I go,
mhm.
that takes a little bit of effort, a little bit of work and practice to be able, even though it's been here my whole life, I haven't used it equally, right? And same with you, you're left-handed, so your
Mhm.
right hand, I go, you've had it your whole life, doesn't mean you use it well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what
To be
changing coordination is like all of a sudden trying to brush your teeth with the other hand. You
Yeah, that's
you can
fun.
do it, but it's awkward. It's like, ugh, this is annoying.
If we can just be curious and laugh through it, we'll get to the other
Or
side.
even when you helped me use the muck fork differently for picking stalls, because the way I had learned to pick stalls, I was putting this twist into every movement,
Right?
and it was killing my back. I was like, why am I so sore when I muck stalls? And so you're like, well, you're going to have to kind of rearrange and think about this and do that. And I'm like, oh my God, it's going to take me an hour to muck one stall.
And that's,
But
yep,
if I didn't change it, I had the choice in that moment. Do I slow
good point.
down and repeat it, even though it takes me longer to do the same job? Or do I suffer the pain of doing it the wrong way and maybe wreck my body in the process?
Push through it.
Yeah,
There's another whole theory of pushing through things.
right, right. So we can feel things like that for ourselves, and it sometimes gives the rider, when I'm working with the horse, I go, okay, we're going to make this small change for you in how you ride. And say it's like you've got to straighten out your lumbar spine a little bit. You can't keep arching your low back,
Hmm.
right? 15 minutes later, that rider who rides 5 times a week, walk, trot, and canter, can't walk for 5 minutes more.
Yeah, the
It's
different fatigue.
exhausting.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
It,
exhausting. And
it's
I go,
exhausting at several layers. It's not just physical. It's emotional, mental, all of it.
yeah. So changing coordination is a big deal. And if you guys play around with these two ideas, because when people ask me what is straight on a circle, I go, it's literal. The horse
Oh,
is straight through the midline while tracking a circle. So to me, it's a literal thing. And people go, oh, straight on a circle means the midline matches the shape of the circle. I go, that's not straight. That's bent. To me, it's literal. It's a broomstick, right? And you can even
hmm,
jump on your muck fork and go out trot in a circle, and your muck fork never bends. It does not have to bend to get around a very tight circle, right? That's how we use our body. It's how the horses use their body. And we don't even notice that our legs are adducting and abducting.
right,
We don't notice that our legs are moving us slightly sideways in order to turn, and we don't have to bend our spine to accomplish that.
right. Because we don't do that when we go
Yeah,
around a circle.
exactly. We don't
Sorry.
walk around turning
I
around
walk
like,
around bent. Come on, people.
yeah. So it's possible even with 4 legs instead of
Yes.
two. Yes.
Well, thank you for entertaining my frustration for the day.
No, it comes up. It may come up again. It's
It might.
something.
I was like, I can't believe I'm running into this again.
No, and I think that's the point of the podcast for you and I meeting is to just plant some seeds out there in the horse world because some of the mechanical strife that we put our horses in
Mm,
is not intentional and it's perpetuated generation to generation, trainer to student to trainer to student, even judges. And I just go, we need to stop, people. We need to
well, and
stop.
I know Jean-Luc Cornel said once at one of his workshops, even if you're an upper level rider competing, you don't practice your test every day. You, you set your horse up and you up so that that is easy
You
by doing,
strengthen the body to do
yeah,
the test.
to do the
Hmm.
test. It's not that the test is not the end all.
Right.
And I think that's the concept we're missing.
Or the other thing, what I really took away as a student of Jean-Luc was coming out of the Cad Noir, which is the classical French school of riding. It's like even he was, we have to respect the classical writings and the classical ideas, but also hold them up to the light of new knowledge.
Mm. Of the new
And
stuff. Yeah.
yes, and if it is accurate, or maybe we tweak our understanding of these old words. It's not that
Mhm.
the old words are wrong. I go, it's sometimes our interpretation
Oh, I
or the
agree.
explanation.
Hmm.
And as we have the capacity to do more and more research, we have better and better tools of measurement, right? So science can sort of give us the benefit of how does this really work on a fundamental mechanical level with the body?
Hmm.
And that's how we stay in line with always working in a way that's in our horse's best interest, rather than sort of making our horse tolerate or work with our outdated ideas, which they will do, but we pay the vet bills. We pay the vet bills.
And yeah, that's kind of how I put it to several clients. Um, we can work on improving biomechanics, or you can just keep calling the vet.
Yeah.
Pick.
Yeah. And some of those treatments, even when we give the most, do the most expensive diagnostics and give the most expensive treatments, 9 out of 10 people I finally talked to about rehab work, that treatment only lasted so long. And then the
Good
problem
point.
came back, right? And then another round of either expensive diagnostics or another round of expensive treatments, and the problem still comes back. And I go,
And if
that's
you don't
because,
change the movement, you're going to get the problem back.
yeah, if you don't change the movement that created the
Yep,
concussion in the first place, then you're just buying some temporary fixes.
agreed.
Yeah. And the best person to change the movement is the rider, the person who's getting the horse to move every day. That's where you change coordination. It doesn't happen in a massage or with the vet treatment or the farrier. I go, all of that's important, but it's how the horse moves on a consistent daily basis that really determines the overall function and health of the body. And that's
Yep.
in our hands. That's in our hands
It
as
is. It's our
riders.
responsibility.
Yeah. And it can really turn around a lameness issue or enhance the performance in any competition we want to ride in. But it's a totally, like right now, it's an earth-shattering paradigm shift for most riders. It's a big deal just to even think differently, but it's possible.
Yes.
Wrap it up there, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Any final words you want to add?
I'd love to get feedback from everybody.
I know. Love the comments, you guys.
Yeah.
And if you have questions, and I will put more video
Yes.
support also on my YouTube channel
Yeah, that'd be cool.
to show some of these things.
That
Yeah,
would be great.
yeah. And just like everybody else, we have a little bit of winter in Florida that doesn't make it easy to do videos. So
Yeah, videoing here in Virginia has pretty much come to a halt with the snowstorms.
I know. I know. So my YouTube videos slowed down quite a bit the past few months because I'm like, I just can't get it done.
I get it.
All right, you
Spring's around
guys.
the corner.
The last of my cough, sorry. Thank you all for joining us so much. We really appreciate all the new subscribers, all the shares, all the likes, all the comments. It keeps us meeting and going and talking about these things that I don't hear many people talking about. That's
No,
why we talk
that's why
about
we have
them.
to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, you
All
guys,
right.
take care, have fun, and we will see you on the next episode of the Horse Geeks podcast.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.